And welcome on board. We're on positivity bias. We're up to chapter 18, and we're talking about disabled or differently abled, a big difference. And the topic here, there's one topic is for back in 1979, there was a very heated debate amongst public health professionals and politicians regarding the disabled. Particularly, we're talking about folks who had been were at a point where they needed lifetime care. They couldn't really manage on their own. They would need lifetime care to some degree, and and so Robert Wilkes, who was the director of Child Development Center at the Coney Island Hospital, he wrote to the Rebbe and he said, as a Jewish social worker and chairman of the Region 2 Council for Mental Retardation in Brooklyn, because at that point anyone who was behind in their intellectual development, they were called retarded. He said, I would be most interested in learning what your views are regarding the care and education of Jewish retarded individuals, those persons who from birth are slow in thinking, speaking, and learning. And so he sought out the Rebbe's insights into this topic. And the whole focus of what the Rebbe was talking about was really revolutionary at that time, was that everyone is born with God-given talents. They're different. But everyone, and when I talk about this with military guys, I talk about the idea that, again, mission focus, but you are mission critical to God's purpose in the world, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. So the mere fact that you're here and alive today, it means you are mission critical. Whatever it is you have to offer, it's mission critical, and you need to be here and focus on that one. So the Rebbe was saying, and here's actually a quote from the Rebbe in his written response. He said, with regard to the, quote, Jewish retarded, parenthetically, I prefer some such term as special people, not simply as a euphemism, but because it would be more accurate reflection, they reflect their situation, especially in view of the fact that in many cases, the retardation is limited to the capacity to absorb and assimilate knowledge, while in other areas they may be quite normal or even above average. So the Rebbe, Wilkes actually says the Rebbe coined the term special, but that's not the point. The point was that the Rebbe was already back in 79, the Rebbe was focusing on every human being has something to contribute to our society, and that it's our responsibility to help that shine and find ways for them to be able to contribute. And in fact, this perceived lacking in one capacity suggests a higher capacity in another. A seeming lack in mental acuity or social sensitivity, for example, may imply a heightened spiritual or imaginative capacity. I want to divert for just a second, but there's a family member, not a direct family, but a family member who is Down syndrome and has and was raised in a large family. And the family was explained early on that these special neshamas, these special souls, may be so pure and untainted that in the channeling down to become in this physical world, that was most devastating and damaging to them. Meaning that they're coming from such a high source that living in this physical world is literally painful, is anguishing, because the godly soul is free from all of the constraints of this world, and all of a sudden they're now in a physical body, and maybe a hampered physical body at that, and the world around them is totally confusing because it's not functions on the spiritual realm where that soul is coming from, because it's coming from such a high source, that this is literally a painful place to be. So the Rebbe was suggesting already back then that every soul that comes into this world has a purpose and has a unique contribution that society needs. In fact, one could even say our society needs them more than we need them more than they need us. There's a contribution there and a very unique gift. So there's a couple of things that come to mind. Let me finish off this piece. So the Rebbe said that it's our responsibility to recognize that and to shine a light on it and bring that out to fruition, to be able to help actualize what their contribution has to be to society. The Rebbe said also, I am quite convinced that if a proper system of aptitude tests were instituted to determine the particular skills of our special children at an early age, and if appropriate classes were established to enable them to develop those skills, the results would be enormously gratifying, if not astounding. And needless to say, such an educational method would greatly enhance their self-confidence and general development, not to mention also the fact that it would enable them to make an important contribution to society. So I want to give a couple of thoughts on this one, examples of this one. There is a school in Chicago. I think it's actually housed in the Kins building or near there. But there's a special school there within the Jewish community that is doing exactly this. The woman who owns the school is doing this, is exactly working to bring out and enhance the special children that are in there, to find their special skill sets and to bring those out. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. On another track, the military track, Israel, and I think we've talked about this before in some of the classes, but Israel has balloon cameras along borders all over the country, where those balloons are stationed. You know, there's heavy balloons. They're not poppable balloons. They're heavy balloons, and they hold cameras up at a certain height so that they can have a view of all the border areas that potentially could be breachable. And those cameras then come back to central commands where there's monitors for those things, right? Most of the people I know would not be able to sit in front of that monitor for 8 hours a day and watch for any anomaly. I mean, a cornfield is a cornfield, for God's sake. How long can you stare at a cornfield, right? But there are a number of people on the spectrum who can do that remarkably well. And they can stare at the screen for 8 hours a day. And if anything inappropriate changes on there, oh, good Lord, you will know about it. They will make sure everyone knows about it, right? And so that unique skill, the Israeli military is actually putting to use, that unique contribution. And those young people, they're in uniform, they do military hikes, they participate in the meals with everyone else, they're doing their military service, and they take it very seriously. But they're able to do something that most of us cannot do. So again, it's finding what those things are, where those areas that shine. I know that there's a young man in the Chabad community in Chicago who the joy he brings to the community in the synagogue, it's a beautiful thing. You know, he has a passion for cars and car keys, but he loves to talk to people, and he's not a security greeter, he's just a greeter to make sure everyone's smiling. And so he loves Shabbos, and there was a time in his adolescence when his parents had sought rabbinical counseling, saying, hey, we're not getting younger. Do we need to institutionalize him? And the rabbi said, does he understand when it's Shabbos? Can he distinguish between it's Shabbos or not Shabbos? Mm-hmm. And the parents said, oh, yes. He looks forward to Shabbos and he makes sure we light candles on time. And oh yes, he's very, very much so. And the Rebbe said, okay, then no, he should not be institutionalized, but rather he should remain a part of the community because he gets it, he understands. So there's obviously that's a challenge, and then the community has to be able to support this, and it can't be all on one set of parents to do it because nobody can do all that. But that's a part of it. So again, it's finding what is the unique quality, what's the great part of it, and how do we bring that part out? And that was what the Rebbe was talking back in the 70s. The second example in this book, which I find fascinating, 1966, Yosef Kabelev, I don't know the proper pronunciation, but anyway, he joined a group of disabled IDF soldiers coming to tour America. It was a trip to try and get their minds off of themselves, and it was an opportunity to come see America. He had sustained injuries in Golan Heights, and he was confined to a wheelchair. And he and a lot of the other people in his group over the years had found that even though they were war heroes and they were acknowledged as war heroes, people were not comfortable being around them, and people found that they weren't, like they weren't contributing members of society anymore. They weren't worthwhile. They weren't useful. And that was kind of the attitude in that time. And in that sense, they were viewed as less than, in constant need of assistance, no longer useful or capable. And that abyss that opened up between them and the rest of society kept getting worse. And it was an insult on top of their injuries, right? So anyway, they were on a group tour to New York. Someone in Chabad heard about it, told the Rebbe about it. An immediate invitation went out to have them come and visit 770 World Headquarters, the Lubavitch World Headquarters, to come and visit and have a private audience with the Rebbe as a group. And they all came in. They were all there. The Rebbe came in once they were all seated. The Rebbe came in and greeted each one by one, directly eye to eye, and spoke with each one for a moment there. Joseph, in his recollections, he says that from that terrible day on, which I had woken without my legs, I have seen all sorts of things in the eyes of those who look at me. Pain, pity, revulsion, anger. This is the first time in all those years I encountered true empathy. True empathy. So when the Rebbe started speaking with them, the first thing he did was he apologized for his Ashkenaz Hebrew.
Oh yeah.
Apologized. Said, I'm sorry if I'm hard to understand, but it's my Ashkenaz Hebrew, and slicha, please forgive me, right? He said, if a person has been deprived of a limb or a faculty, this itself indicates that God has given that person special powers to overcome the limitations, and this enough power to overcome limitations and surpass the achievements of ordinary folk. In other words, if you go by the idea that God doesn't give us a challenge that we can't overcome, the fact that this person no longer has limbs that the rest of us have means that person has a capacity, untapped capacity, that the rest of us don't even have. That person has a strength and a power that we can't access because it's unique to them, and God wouldn't give us a challenge we can't overcome. Obviously, if they have less, they must have been given more in a deeper format.
Yeah.
And they therefore have a potential to do things that we can't even do. And as the Rebbe said on numerous occasions, we have the capacity, untold hidden capacities that we have to live up to. So the Rebbe, in this case, again, taking society's perceptions and flipping it upside down and saying, far from being disabled veterans, as a result of their injuries, they were actually blessed with near superhuman powers to overcome obstacles and rise above their limitations. And of course, ultimately, it was up to them to access those energies, but they have them. And the Rebbe made a biblical example of how Jacob, in his wrestling with the angel, He was injured and walked away with an injured leg, but he also walked away with a new name and a new mission. And so with that injury came the power to have a new mission, a new assignment, and a new capability, a new name. What was the new name? You will no longer be called Yaakov, which means the heel, but you will be called Yisrael, which means the capacity to overcome angels and people. And therefore to be able to thrive and inspire and contribute in a way. And the Rebbe said, I therefore suggest.
I'm sorry, I have to go.
Love you. See you later.
Go.
The Rebbe said, of course, it's none of my business. He said, of course, it's none of my business, but Jews are famous for voicing opinions no matter what the concerns are, and without waiting for being invited to speak up. So he said, you should no longer be called Necha Yisrael, the Israeli disabled, but you should be called Mitzvone Yisrael, the exceptional of Israel. So again, the Rebbe is taking this idea of flipping the idea on its head. We were calling them disabled. The Rebbe is saying, no, not disabled, exceptional, because they have an inner resource to accomplish their mission. We all have a mission. They have inner resources to accomplish their mission with less than the rest of us are given to accomplish ours. So therefore, they are mitziyonim. They're exceptional. And again, we talk about this whole concept of positivity bias, right? The world can have its worldview and focus on the negative. Our responsibility is to see beyond that, deeper and beyond that, and see what's God's intention. What's the real thing going on here? Are these people being compromised, or are they given hidden resources to accomplish more than others? And their mission may be different than ours, and they have the wherewithal to actually accomplish those missions. And it's our job to help them achieve those things. So it's a whole different way of viewing the reality of the situation.
So did the rabbi